RPG a Day 2019 challenge continues, and today's prompt is critical. A critical in most fantasy role-playing games means a combat hit that is unequivocally hitting, it's doing a lot of damage, it's a great moment in the game, it's like that oof moment of victory. It's one of the reasons that an older version of Dungeons & Dragons had a thing where you had to confirm the critical. You had to roll again to find out whether or not you'd really hit, and it was super frustrating because the thing about a critical is that you roll the dice and you know you did it. There's a lot of moments in role-playing games where you roll the dice and you're uncertain whether or not you've hit, but a critical, you know right away. Most of the conventions for most games, the critical hits. My introduction to the idea of a critical came when I started playing Middle-earth role-playing back in the 1980s. I don't have the original book that I bought back then. This is the collector's edition, which came out later in the 90s, which a friend gave to me when his girlfriend told him that she felt that this was too dark and satanic. This was actually the game that I used to avoid people at church asking, you know, be like, "Are you playing Dungeons and Dragons?" They'd be like, "No, we're not. We're playing a game based on Tolkien's world," and they were totally okay with that for some reason, because Tolkien's okay, but Yugoloths are not. So here we have Middle-earth role-playing, which was this very crunchy system. Crunchy, whenever you hear the word crunchy in game talk, it's going to mean that there's a ton of rules. And Middle-earth role-playing was the basic version of an even crunchier game called Rolemaster. And both of them are sort of famous for having a lot of tables. And my favorite tables were the critical tables, because they gave these very detailed descriptions of what happened when you rolled, and you'd have this very precise outcome that the book would say, this is exactly what you did. So let's take a look at one of the combat tables here. So you take a swing with your sword and you hit the / critical table. The weakest result here is weak strike yields no extra damage, plus 0 hits. Well, gosh, that's a disappointment, isn't it? You get a critical, you roll, and then it's not really as critical as you thought. That's disappointing. But the best result that you could get in here is strike to head destroys brain. Life is hard for the unfortunate fool. Expires in a heap immediately. Let's take a look at a few other examples here. Blow to jaw, drives bone into brain, dies instantly. That's the 100 result here. This was a game that worked on the percentile dice, and so that would be a 20 in Dungeons & Dragons. Here's some more 100. Strike through eye, dies instantly. A real eyeful. Haha, guffaw, guffaw. Upper chest strike, knock 10 feet sideways, fall down, break both arms. A 2-month coma results. And then there's a grappling table. There are tables for heat, cold, electricity. Nervous system acts as a superconductor. Instant death provides all with a fine light show. Guffaw, ha 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 ha. So these is very, very intricate, explicit descriptions for what's happening. And then there were fumble tables, where this is like your ultimate screw up. Worst move seen in ages, -60 to activity from a pulled groin. Nothing like a pulled groin for a bunch of junior high players to have a good chuckle about. Foe is stunned 2 rounds laughing. Missile weapons fumble table. Ammunition slips as you fire. The missile goes through your hand. It's useless. And then there's this one page further in and further on where you get general, interaction and influence, disarm, trap, and pick, lock, read rune, and use item, perception, and track. So inasmuch as Middle-earth role-playing was gratuitously gory and detailed in ways that Tolkien's fights never were, and that was one of the great dissonances for this game from its source material, it at least had what we would think of as critical tables for skills. And you had blunders for those as well. If picking a lock, lockpick is broken and stuck in the lock, rendering it unopenable until removed. This requires someone other than you to successfully pick the lock. Any traps connected to it are set off. If disarming a trap, the trap is activated. But there was a sense in even here where you can see that there is far less detail in the everyday or skill-oriented roles than there were for those critical combat roles. And this is something that's bothered me about the idea of the critical, is that it is almost always only reserved for combat. I have a table rule when I play Dungeons & Dragons, and I haven't been using it recently because I was trying to lean in on the rules as they're written, but I'm going to go back to having this as part of my table, which is that if you roll a 20, you succeeded. Doesn't matter what you're doing. Skill, combat, 20 is a win. Why is it that we can have an unmitigated moment of awesome when it's combat? And I know it doesn't defeat the enemy just like that, but why not have the possibility of the critical skill roll or the fumble on a skill roll? Because that allows for more focus on these other areas of the game, not just privileging combat. My shirt says, "You can certainly try." This is a sort of joke between dungeon masters and players. The response to a player saying, "Can I, blah, blah, blah," and the dungeon master saying, "You can certainly try." And the wonderful thing in combat about a critical is that you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that not only did you try, but you succeeded. You know right away, and you know with a 1 that you fumbled. Why not have that in skills as well? You know, your player gets to know absolutely right in that moment that they succeeded or that they failed. And that gives them some agency on their side of the table to be able to resolve that in a storytelling way. And the more agency that we give to players, I find anyway, the more fun they have at the table, which is critical to good gaming.